reluctant to admit it. Perhaps you're teasing us. Are you teasing us?
I've come for my father!
Sequels are very hard, and Candyman 2 was hard too. I mean, I think you make a picture which has some real originality in the marketplace, you're going to get kicked hard on the second picture, whatever happens critically. Critics don't like sequels to pictures that have got a lot of originality. It's really hard for the filmmaker.
Tony was director on the second film. He was working on the second film under a great deal of pressure. The pressure to get that second film out was enormous. So I think, you know, there were things that I'm sure he'd like to do again and things that we'd all like to do again.
Having done so much work on the original film, I had become very familiar with the material, had an affinity, obviously an affinity for it, because I was able to create material for Hellraiser that felt like it belonged. It didn't feel like out of left field, and I had come to Chris and Clive and said I would like to do the sequel, because they had actually hired or wanted another director to come on board before, and he then had to drop out. And once he dropped out, I said, you know, I think I'd like to come in and give it a whirl.
Tony and I got on great almost from the get-go. Actually, it was funny. I had had very little experience with the film world. So my assumption when I heard that a former executive of New World Pictures is coming in to direct the movie and you're going to work together, I pictured a guy at least 10 years older than me in a three-piece suit. And Tony, having read the script, apparently pictured a multi-pierced, tattooed punk. So we were very surprised when the door opened and we found ourselves staring at guys who looked pretty much like each other.
And you wanted to know?
The doctor. Is it?
Hellbound followed pretty fast on the heels of Hellraiser. We were shooting Hellraiser at the end of '86. It came out in '87, and I guess the following year was when we started work on Hellbound. So it was pretty soon after. I think New World knew that they had something interesting, and I think unless it had dived at the box office, I think it was pretty certain that they were going to go ahead with a sequel.
I was signed for a 2-picture deal. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew I was doing Hellbound when I was doing Hellraiser. And I think it was about a year afterwards I did Hellbound. Went back to London, but we shot, not in the house, clearly. We shot at Pinewood Studios, which was great.
Probably within, must have been within about a year, I would think. Soon after Hellraiser 1 came out, they knew that they wanted to do number 2. I must admit I wasn't sure that I really wanted to do number 2, to put myself through that kind of mental torment of having their costume on.
We've done the main shooting on Hellraiser, and then as we've gone back to the States, they really loved it, so they decided to put some more money in, so that you get a lot more, most of the effects that we see, like the reconstituting brain and so on, were shot after the main shoot. It became fairly obvious then that this is, you know, people had confidence there was going to be a second one, so agreed to do it. I did put in the proviso, though, that I would be really grateful if they allowed me to see in the second movie, and they did agree that. So if you look at the Shattering Cenobite at the end of the movie, he's got eyes. They dropped the scene where the skin was peeled off.
Being a memorable presence in the first movie actually isn't in it that much. And there's certainly a lot more of him in Hellraiser 2 and Hellraiser 3. So, you know, having known Doug for a long time and knowing his theatrical background, I knew that he could probably get away with a kind of overly articulate elegance that perhaps other movie monsters couldn't. So, you know, I indulged my delight in the well-spoken monster, knowing that Doug too had a certain delight in that as well, and would deliver on it, and he did in spades.
The differences for Pinhead between the first and the second film were A, that he was on screen more, and also we were introducing the backstory idea for the first time, very briefly, at the top of the film, of the army captain, which would get explored much more later in Hellraiser 3, but this was the first time that backstory had come in. It gave me a little bit more to think about. I had been aware, approaching the character for the first film, that obviously he had been a human being once, but I had no idea when. Last week or last year, 10 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. I didn't know. So this now gave me something more concrete to work from. The success of the character in the first film is largely about his sense of complete mystery and sense of power, because you don't see him very much. The first time you see him, it's enigmatic. You don't know who he is, why he is, where he is, how he is, what does he want, what does he do, where does he come from, where's he going when this is all over. And at the end of the movie, really those questions have not been answered. Once you move on to a sequel, everything changes.
This is mine.
Nick Vince almost got skewered. Well, he did, but he almost got very, very, very wounded.
There was the incident where they managed to get a large metal hook into my mouth, into the roof of my mouth. That was it. This is when we were filming the death scene. You had this spinning pillar behind me, this railway sleeper behind me, and from that there was a chain and the hook. And I mean, you could not recreate it. You could not plan it. It's a hook, big hook. Yay long hook on the end of a chain just spinning around. As I opened my mouth to scream, it just went straight in. I remember that the only thing I said was, right, teeth out, nurse in. That's all I could think of. It was like, what the hell is going on? And I think much to everybody's frustration, the cameraman had been instructed to pan up just before it happened, so it's not recorded on film. Otherwise, I'm sure it would have made it into the movie.
I was given 3 contracts for this second movie, The Hellbound. I played a creature trapped in hell, writing blood on the wall. I played Frank the Monster in flashback, but primarily, and what I'm credited for, was this character Browning, the nutcase in the padded cell. Mr. Browning, who whose problem was he was a raving lunatic who thought that bugs and creepy crawlies were coming out of every part of his flesh. And Dr. Stannard, I seem to remember his name, played by my chum, Ken Cranham, gets him pulls him out of the padded cell and walks him onto this mattress. This is the rebirth of Julia scene. How the same syndrome, blood spill, brings back from the wherever, at the depths of the rebirth of some ghastly creature, Julia in this case. So I'm playing this bloke called Browning. So he leads me into the study where the mattress is on the floor, and I'm going like this, get them off me, these bugs and the intercuts of worms and maggots creeping around on my arm. And he then hands me this cutthroat razor, which of course I go, oh, well, now I really can go to work on these maggots. And subsequently I sliced myself to pieces, all parts of the body. Clive thought it would be a good idea to cut me dick off. I don't know why, they didn't keep that in. And eventually fall back on the mattress, blood everywhere, and out comes Julia from the mattress, and then gobbles me up, basically. 2 mouthfuls of custard later.
When they
enter the underworld there, and they first see the Leviathan, you'll see, you probably won't catch this, but with the those Tibetan horns, I had them Morse code the word God. You know, I don't know exactly what the Morse code is on it, but you'll hear this ba ba dot ba ba dot dot, or whatever the Morse code would be for God.
I think actually Hellraiser 2 has got some pretty cool things in it. I think it's an uneven movie, but I think the first movie's uneven too. I think there's some really marvelous lines in it, courtesy of Pete. I think Channard's a great character. There's an expansiveness to the mythology, which I enjoyed. What can I say? I think it's a much better sequel than most sequels to low-budget horror movies. And I'm not damning with faint praise by saying that. I think there are really strong things in the movie, and I actually had a good time making it, and I enjoyed Tony on it. I thought he brought his own quirky thing to it, as I brought my own quirky thing to the first picture. I think one of the interesting things about the Hellraiser movies is that they all, in their way, reflect their makers.
I think that I, at that stage in my life, was probably in a pretty dark place mentally, and I think that a lot of that probably shows through, and I mean mentally in terms of my attitudes about the state of the world and good and evil. Those things, which I still am concerned about today, are, you know, if you put a scale, you know, maybe in 1988 when I did the film, they were weighting down like this, but today they're more, you know, it's more balanced, or maybe this way, because you know, my life is different now, but then I brought a pretty dark outlook.
I don't think for a second that the stories are exhausted. This particular storyteller might be exhausted in that particular area, but I have other stories to tell elsewhere, and hopefully, you know, fresh blood will come in and tell fresh stories in the Hellraiser field.